Welcome back to Agritecture's podcast, Locally Grown In, a podcast on a mission to help entrepreneurs growing food locally. We're happy to have you back today, and I'm really excited to have Briana joining me for the introduction to this episode and a very special city. How are you doing, Briana?
I'm good. I'm excited to change my role from being behind the scenes on the audio, and now I'm stepping up to the mic.
Oh yeah, always stepping up. That's a good way to do it. And I think that connects a lot to the theme and the city we're looking at today, which is the Big Apple, New York City, our hometown, a place where it's always hustle and bustle, and probably one of the last places you would think urban farming would take off, and yet it is. And Briana, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on this interview today as we set it up was you have a lot of experience kind of connecting with the local food scene even before you started working with Agritecture. Can you tell us about some of the collaborations and work you've been doing?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in food. And when I was undergrad, I started doing some research about the history of the environment and our modern food production landscape as it is, and was pretty alarmed at how uneducated people are about where their food comes from. So when I moved back to New York, I wanted to get more involved and helping to re-educate New Yorkers on, where their food comes from and the importance of eating local seasonal food.
Yeah, that's super cool. I love that you've kind of got this experience from all these different angles, from the sale of food to capturing food waste. Now you're working with Agritecture. We're all about helping to design urban farms. So you're really kind of hitting every angle. And you're going back to school, right, Briana, in the fall? What are you going to be studying and where?
I'm going to the New School to get my master's in environmental policy and sustainability management.
Awesome. And what are you looking forward to learning in that degree?
There's so much. I'm kind of excited to go in with, an open mind. I obviously already have such a strong interest in food and urban ag, but I kind of want to see what else there is for me to explore, especially on the policy side. I'm really excited to learn more about just the different levels of thinking about policy and how to create effective policy that includes every type of New Yorker and not just, a handful of people. I think that can be a difficult part of policymaking, and just making sure that there's a balance of representation in the decision-making process. I think that has a huge part.
Well, I think we need the help. Policy is such a difficult thing, like you said, to kind of get something that's beneficial, policies in place that are beneficial for the maximum amount of people. You have policy that's needed to help those that are struggling in New York City and to help make the city more equitable. But then you have a city that has some of the highest real estate. It's got really, really extreme wealth and also extreme poverty. And so to get policy in place that can kind of fit within all those competing interests can be a really big challenge. And we've been working, when I say we, I mean Agritecture, we've been working on lobbying and trying to influence policy for urban agriculture for about 5 years now. And it's been quite a journey. For Agritecture, it all started when we got approached by the Brooklyn Borough President's Office, and they said, hey, can you bring a bunch of commercial urban farmers together and tell us what your needs are? And this was really cool because we had just started our NYC Ag Collective. You can learn more about that collective at farming.nyc. And so we kind of had this group where we could go at once, and we kind of created this list of questions and concerns. And for most of the for-profit farmers, it was about zoning. It was about being able to sell product on residential land. It was about recognition of this as a use. It was about certain incentives to help train and get new talent into the industry. And we kind of created this list and put it forward. And that was really one of the initial steps that led to the passing of the first urban ag bill that actually resulted in a website that now guides new urban farmers and people thinking about urban farming on what to do. And you can search that by searching NYC Urban Agriculture and looking at the city site. And so let's dive into some of the challenges that NYC is facing, and I guess also some of the benefits that are coming from urban ag. So there's kind of 5 main points we're going to cover in this episode. So number 1 is really that NYC is food insecure. That may surprise you. NYC has over 8 million people. Within that, we have 1.4 million New Yorkers who live in households that cannot afford an adequate supply of nutritious food. That means that every week they don't have enough money to get nutritious food to stay healthy, active, and contribute to society as well as they can. That's scary.
Yeah, it's really scary because that really leads to a public health crisis that we're facing. With 1 million residents who are living in food desert communities and 25% of those are children, we're actually spending, New York City spends over $4 billion on healthcare related to poor diet and malnutrition. And this number is only growing.
It's an incredibly large number. And I think that is really one way to drive policy, right? Is to say, look, we have communities in need, we have communities that are suffering, and that's costing us. That's costing taxpayers as well. There's not only the equity and justice that we need to provide to those in need that are suffering, those over 1 million New Yorkers, but there's also the economic case for it. So if we look at organizations like Teens for Food Justice, where I'm a board member, they do get some funding from the Brooklyn Borough President's Office and other groups that are supporting their mission, which is to really convert unused spaces in schools into productive farms and teach the youth there how to build the farms, run them, and cook with the food so they can transform their lives and eat more nutritious food and also improve every single thing in their life, from test scores to curiosity. Basically, it's using food and vertical farming as a way to transform their lives. And so it's been really great to see that there's certain local politicians in the boroughs that are able to give money to these groups and support their mission because they know that it's impacting health. But I think that is just the first step towards a more comprehensive policy. Because Briana, as you know, and as we get into in the interview today, there still is this issue with the 600 plus community gardens that are not protected in New York City and do produce food and impact that health crisis in a positive way.
Yeah, and I think we learned a lot from our interview with Ray about how some of these communities really rely on community gardens to provide a nourishing meal for their family. So it's really about kind of showing the benefits of community gardens and presenting it in a way as it's compared to its monetary value.
Yeah, and I think that leads great into point number 2, which is that even in cities as dense and expensive as New York City, there are available spaces, and the spaces that have already been converted into farms need to be protected. And if they are going to be converted into some kind of real estate development, we need to get more creative from an architectural perspective, from an urban planning perspective, but how we protect them. Because like Briana said, they impact food insecurity, they impact health, they create safe spaces, they reduce the heat island effect, they manage rainwater, they provide biodiversity, they provide aesthetic impact that can help the community feel pride, they actually increase the real estate value. I mean, the list is pretty long. So we really need to get creative in New York City about how we integrate more agriculture into the built environment. Point number 3 is really about kind of the influence, and this was really interesting. I hope you feel the same way, Briana, but talking to Rob and Anastasia, that the fact that people can visit these farms is a really big impact in itself.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, New Yorkers don't really have that access to nature. And especially for kids who can grow up and go to an urban farm and learn about where their food comes from, and they can really understand, okay, my food doesn't just magically appear. It doesn't just come from a bodega or seamless. It grows, and they can kind of learn about that process. And I think that really helps shape their life.
Yeah, it inspires us. I think you're totally right? These spaces inspire us. And we're going to get into that. Rob and Anastasia are going to tell you some specific examples of how visiting a farm can actually change that audience and the residents of the city. Another theme we're going to talk about in today's episode is entrepreneurship and urban agriculture and the thriving urban ag scene and social entrepreneurship that's happening here. And finally, we're going to talk about the role of engaging youth and talking about programming that happens in these community gardens can really engage youth that may have lost their way and bring them back on track and help them contribute to society in a more positive. So I'm really excited about this episode.
Me too.
And so we're going to get into the interviews now. We've got 3 awesome interviews coming up. And before I get into them, I just want to give one plug, NYC Ag Tech Week. This is our 4th year of this incredible event, which features urban farming tours, events, technology demos, policy discussions, amazing meals and cocktail events all across the city. And this is our 4th year doing it. It's organized by the NYC Agriculture Collective. You can learn more about it at nycagtechweek.com. So we really want to see you there, September 21 to 26, 2019, coming up fast. And now we're joined by two innovative urban farmers in New York City. We've got Rob Laing here, CEO of Farm One, and Anastasia Plakias, COO of Brooklyn Grange. How are you both doing?
Doing great.
Doing great, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us today. So I'll just introduce you both briefly for our audience. Anastasia is COO and co-founder of Brooklyn Grange. And Rob is a successful tech entrepreneur, having exited from previous business. He's also moved to New York City to pursue his interests in local food, culinary arts, and urban farming. How are you doing, Rob?
Doing great.
So Anastasia, on your bio, it says you work to leverage Brooklyn Grange as a platform for positive conversations about food and farming and a resource for community building. Can you tell us what that means to you?
Oh my gosh, that could take a whole half hour. But as briefly as I can, we really believe that urban farming has capacities beyond just food production. And moreover, in a city of 8 million, urban farms are probably really never going to feed entire cities. So we feel that, we have this obligation, this duty to connect urbanites who are increasingly alienated from food production and frankly from nature with just green spaces to begin with, but also with their food production system. And so, as this urban green space, we do the best we can to find avenues for New Yorkers to come and visit the farm. We feel a duty to connect every single type of New Yorker, and that is a huge, ambitious job, one that we'll never stop working on. That is a job that gets me out of bed every morning.
So for those of us that are listening that haven't had the pleasure to visit Brooklyn Grange, what would someone expect to see when they arrive at Brooklyn Grange?
So I'll give you 2 different days at Brooklyn Grange. If you walk up on a Thursday morning in the rain, you will see our farmers. Let's say it's a real windy, rainy Thursday morning. You walk out onto Brooklyn Grange's Navy Yard roof. You're going to see our team harvesting for our wholesale orders. There might be salad greens flying through the air in that wind, but we're cranking out hundreds and hundreds of pounds at a single harvest using really little to no mechanization. If you visit on a Saturday evening, you might find a couple celebrating their wedding. So, really and truly, the farm is a lot of different things for different people.
Now, Rob, going to you, you've lived around the world and you decided to come to New York to start an indoor vertical farm. What inspired you to do that?
Yeah, so it was definitely a big career change for me. I had been working in design and tech, and I was really intrigued by working in food somehow. I took a bunch of culinary classes, but I knew that I really didn't have it in me to become a chef, but I wanted to get involved in food, and I was just fascinated by ingredients, particularly interesting ingredients that you might find at a farmer's market. And I really got to learn about that and started to think about, okay, could I start to apply some of the new technology that I was seeing? And on TV, I was seeing people in Japan, for instance, growing like lettuce under LED lights and doing that kind of stuff. And I just thought that was really intriguing. And so I thought, hey, maybe there's a business to be had there. Maybe I could combine this love of specialty ingredients and also this vertical farming thing that I knew nothing about. And so I did a whole bunch of research. I remember back in late 2015 doing a Skype call with you, Henry, and like trying to figure out like, how do I do this thing? I need help. And put together this simple business plan and a way of starting something that would be a pilot, a test. And you guys helped me a lot with that. And, from there, it was this idea of trying to do something very small scale. I didn't want to raise loads of money for that. And I wanted to see, will some of the best chefs in the world, will they try produce that has been grown in an indoor farm? And it turned out, because we were able to grow stuff that tasted amazing, like, yes, they would. And yes, it was possible to deliver by bike and subway. Yes, it was possible to work with a culinary school. And yes, it was possible to build a slightly larger farm right in the middle of Manhattan.
And so beyond kind of that experiment, right, can we grow indoors, grow unique crops, and will the chefs buy it? Were there any other values that have been kind of driving your design of Farm One?
Yeah, I think that a lot of things. I mean, firstly, I had come out of, I might say, a slightly negative experience working with VCs and kind of big, investors and stuff. So I did want to start small. And then I think that one of the things that we learned really quickly was that, this is about food and it's about working with amazing chefs who want to create really great things. And so it's a very kind of local business. And I think you'll find that a lot of the time with urban farmers, like it is down to what street are you on and who do you sell to? And you have this direct personal connection with them in a way that they can't even get with, farms upstate New York, because they can't see those farmers as regularly, and they can't bring their teams to visit the farm as easily. And so when we have farms in the city, it's this great opportunity to bring chefs and young people who work in the industry to see, okay, this is how a marigold looks when it's growing. This is how cilantro berries look as they're forming on the plant. That's been really exciting.
What are some of the stories that you've seen from running farms and having people visit your farms? Because both of you have tours of your farms, you're relatively open. What's the impact you're making?
When we started the farm, we immediately got inundated with requests from camp counselors and school teachers to bring kids up. And at first it was mostly private schools, so they offered us, field trip fees. And it was working out fine, but I'm a New York City public school kid myself, so when we got the call from that Title I school that didn't have budget for field trip fees, it was, of course, a no-brainer. Get them up here, we'll waive the fee, just make it happen. And, then another request and another pro bono tour, and it starts to add up. And 10 hours a week of pro bono visits later, you realize this is not something that is sustainable. This is not part of our business model. And, we can't meet any of our other mission goals. We can't function as a triple bottom line business if we're bankrupt and we're not in business. So we realized very quickly that we needed to find a way to engage K through 12 youth that was equitable, and that really needed to be a separate organization. And that's how City Growers was born. And sometimes, you have to fail at something to figure out how to do it right. And also there is a fourth P. Everybody knows the three Ps in the triple bottom line, right? It's profit, people, and planet. And it's not profit and people and planet later. It's those three in balance. But there's a fourth P that's crucial to executing well on those first three, and that's partnerships. Because you're going to struggle with one of those first three Ps. And it can't be profit. Because again, if you're bankrupt, you can't execute on the other two. So you have to find partners who excel at the things you struggle with and who struggle with the things you excel at. So for us, City Growers is a crucial example of that. And one of our favorites and a kind of a farm classic is they do the compost little dance, which is for those listening, since you can't see me, I'm making a mouth chomping with my hand, and it's use both hands. So it's munch, munch, wiggle, wiggle. You use your whole body. You got to wiggle, wiggle, poop, poop. So like a kind of double squat. Compost. So on any given day up on the farm, you can hear like 36-year-olds just screaming the words munch, munch, wiggle, wiggle, poop, poop, compost. Because what 6-year-old doesn't love an opportunity to scream the word poop? But it is a great equalizer. So for those kids, you get, especially the middle school, high school kids, sometimes you see kids come up, they're afraid of bees. I certainly was growing up as a city kid. They don't want to get their shoes dirty. They're not sure about any of this. And 20 minutes later, it doesn't matter who's the coolest kid in the class, who's got the coolest, newest phone. It's just everybody's just giving themselves over to the wonder that is nature. And that is kind of an astounding thing, but I'll tell you something. It's not just the kids. The people who I think get the most excited is like the 40-year-old guy who's never pulled a carrot out of the ground before. Mm-hmm. And you can see the joy spread across their face, that like kind of suction when the carrot first kind of gives way and the roots rip, and it's a really magical experience. And that is something that should be a right shared by all, not a privilege held. So that's what I live for, are those moments.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. And I think one of the things that surprised me as someone who's come from different industries is just like how excited people get and how they're determined to like come to the farm through any means necessary and visit it. And they'll come for a tour and they'll do a class and they'll bring other people and then they'll say, I want to build something at home. I want to do. And so I think there's a delight there that people have about discovering this and discovering it in New York City where you sort of don't expect it. Neither of us, when you think about New York City, you don't think of a great farm on a rooftop or one in a basement in Tribeca. So that excitement is something that kind of gets us through some of the harder moments, the wet Thursday mornings or the equivalent in the basement, which is great.
And so tell us about some of the tours that you do, Brock. You do tours, you do classes. It's a little bit of a different style from Brooklyn Grange in some ways, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, it all started because it was kind of like what you said. It was that people would say, hey, can I come and visit the farm? Like my friends. And I'd be like, okay, sure. And then it'd be like a friend of a friend. And I'd be like, okay, sure. And then it would be like a friend of a friend of a friend. And I'm like, okay, all right. And so we realized that people were actually excited about this experience of tasting all these things. And, we grow at any one time up to 100 different flavors. And most of those are things that people have never had before.
A lot of people look up to both of you, right? They see you as celebrities in the urban farming space. They see your farms on the internet. They want to visit. They want to be like you. What do you think about kind of what's happening there with the farming is sexy movement and people kind of aspiring to be urban farmers?
I'll start. I definitely think once you work like literally a day on the farm, you discover like there's not that much glamour. And so I think that, I think it's only a good thing.
Before I answer that question, can I ask you a question?
You may ask.
What's your rainy Thursday morning on the farm? Like you talked about it being hard. This is not like I as a soil-based farm for like us for hard. Yeah. A hard day is like it's raining, it's more wind. Yeah. What is a hard day for?
Well, I first of all, I do not want to say that working at Farm One is like harder than or as hard as working like with soil or working, in a traditional farm. Definitely not. But, we have historically just wrestled with the building that we're in. And so, sometimes on a day where it's 90 degrees outside, because everything's broken, it'll be like 110 degrees indoors. And then you're still having to do all the normal farm work. And that can just be like, really hard. And then, we'll get a delivery in and we'll get deliveries of growing media and everyone has to schlep that downstairs and like there's a lot of carrying and all this kind of stuff. So it probably isn't as hard as working outdoors, but it definitely is serious work. And I think that, the other thing is just getting up, like the people who work at Farm One, often they get up at, 4:35, they're in the farm at 6, like they're working to get that harvest out. And I think that it doesn't match what a lot of people have seen, like on the internet, pictures of people in hydroponics just like delicately tinkering with a seed or something. I mean, one of the things that vertical farming, I think, does horrendously is it doesn't really communicate as an industry, like what it's like and how much volume you got to push. And you got to be ruthless. Because if you're not ruthless on your farm, you will not make money.
That's, truer words. I can't even tell you how many little projects we had when we first started the farm.
And I think that there's got to be this balance in the industry. People who've been around the block,
rightly and fairly, I think a lot of the people who've spent decades recovering soil, capturing carbon, figuring out how to make truly regenerative agriculture sustainable, look at us and say, what are you doing? You're noise. You're a distraction. And you know what? I think it's a fair point, but I also think that when most of the time, I hope I've been able to get folks excited about what we're doing, because a lot of it is just trying to connect folks with agriculture so that when folks go to the store and they're looking at those two options, and one is a bin of loose leaf, unwashed, local salad greens grown without any synthetics, but maybe not certified organic, and the other is a box of pre-washed salad greens, sent from the Southwest, grown in essentially sand and, sanitized and boxed up in a plastic clamshell. And they make the choice to buy those loose leaf salad greens and go home and have to wash them. Brooklyn Grange can help inform consumers so they can make choices of their own volition about how they want to consume their food. And I feel like we have repaid a little bit of the debt that our predecessors who farmed in soil for decades and have taught us everything we know. That's the goal.
Yeah.
So, we all agree that, urban farming may be a small slice of the total yield that we need, but both of your organizations have really done interesting approaches to using unused space in the city and making it productive. And when I think about the future of cities and kind of the concept of agriculture is how do we make cities more productive? How do we think of buildings not as consumers, but as producers? And your models really are pushing that envelope forward. So how do you see that?
Yeah, from our perspective, we do vertical farming, so we're using artificial light, we're using hydroponics. we've really tried to build and design in such a way that in the future, we want to be able to fit farms in almost any kind of space. So you go like, okay, as long as it's at least maybe 500 square foot or something, we can make this work. And that's tiny in a city like New York. There's millions of square feet like that. And what we want to see is we want to see the price of this technology go down. We want to see LED prices go down, and they are going down. And it's still an investment, but it means that actually, this kind of farming becomes accessible to a whole load of people. And we're just really excited about that because that means, okay, we can convert loads of space that could have never been farm space before, if you think about it, and space that's right next to where people live, right next to where people learn. And it gives a huge number of people access to learning about food, being part of that process. And, it's hugely democratizing.
Yeah, we think about space and urban development in a little bit of a different way because we farm in soil outdoors. We believe that soil-based urban agriculture has the capacity to monetize the creation and maintenance of the green spaces that cities sorely need to become more sustainable and resilient and equitable. And I think we're at a turning point. One of the sort of most powerful and heavy things about standing on the roof of the Brooklyn Navy Yard is you're looking at this. The view is insane from just an objective perspective. The view from the Navy Yard is specifically really powerful because you're looking at a historically significant piece of land that was really important to the native tribes whose land this was. And then it's also, Wallabout Bay is historically significant in terms of the British prison ships that were there during the Revolutionary War. But you also can't help but be confronted by the presence of a bazillion construction cranes and new developments going on. Downtown Brooklyn is looming over us. And so you really are confronted by this very significant historical past, but at the same time, you're slapped in the face by the future that is coming for us. Commercial real estate in New York City is not going to slow down. Real estate development in New York City is not going to slow down. Can we harness some of that energy and shift it towards a more sustainable kind of development? And that necessarily is going to have to include green space that offers ecosystem services like mitigating combined sewage overflow, reducing urban heat island effect. I'm sorry, it's 2019. This is a first world country. We should not be losing vulnerable members of our communities to heat waves. Right. Can we reduce noise pollution? Nobody talks about noise pollution, but it is real. And so for us, it was really exciting to get to work with our electeds, particularly Councilmember Raphael Espinal, who Henry and I had the pleasure of sitting with a number of times prior to his really lobbying for the Climate Mobilization Act.
What do you see? What's your perspective on kind of the future of climate change, the pressure on the food system? And do you think that could shift some of these? Do you think that could be the lever in a very scary way in some ways that could shift and maybe accelerate urban agriculture and the need for it? Do you think scarcity might be the major driver in the future?
I'd say we have an angle on this, which is that the reason that chefs like our produce is that the alternative is shipping something in from a long way away. And they can tell the difference in two ways. The flavor is great and it lasts longer. And if they care about sustainability, they care about the food miles and that stuff. But those two things are really compelling for chefs, And the problem they have right now is they don't actually have loads of options in terms of that. So we're here, Brooklyn Grange is here for some of that produce as well. Urban agriculture, certainly at the higher end, is starting to provide options that didn't exist in the past. Now, where that ends up and how broad that goes, I think it's down to cost in a way. And right now, vertical farming is too expensive for commodity crops most of the time. But, give it 10 years, give it 20 years, and obviously that starts to look a little bit different. And if you are a city, you start to think about, okay, in general, where am I getting all my produce from? And if it's feasible to grow it locally, and that provides jobs for people locally, and so I don't know about, the much bigger picture, but I do think there's some really important market forces there that people are starting to respond to.
That's a good sign.
I also think that this is a much larger conversation, not just about climate change, but about the way we've built our food system in this country. We spend a smaller percent of our income in the US on food than anywhere else in the world. And yes, we make more money, but it's disproportionate. It's a symptom of a food system that profits off of its people. We get rich once by selling people cheap processed foods that make them sick, and then again by treating them for the medical services that they need because the food makes them sick. I think regenerative soil-based agriculture has a huge role to play in correcting some of the issues that we've created. That said, I also often meet bullish soil proponents who maybe are a little bit freaked out by or have qualms with CEA farming. And, I think we do have to really consider whether we are going to have to get comfortable with alternative methods of growing food.
I can tell you there's some real shifts happening that are forcing a lot more crops to consider growing indoors. But we have clients and leads who are looking for hazelnut production indoors and cacao production and coffee, and they're experimenting with it because it's such a threat. The models that are threatening some of those crops are so extreme, and to grow those crops indoors is very, very difficult. So if they're looking at that, then that's an interesting sign of the times. Well, I really want to thank both Rob Laing and Anastasia Plakias for joining me today on Locally Grown In. You both inspire me. You can learn more about Brooklyn Grange at brooklyngrangefarm.com, and you can learn more about Farm One at farm.one, and be sure to check out their Instagrams. They're full of beautiful pictures, inspiring images, and every now and then a reality check. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, Henry.
Next up, I'm joined by Raymond Figueroa, and it's really exciting to have you here, Raymond. I was looking at your profile, and honestly, I have 12 bullet points for what you're involved in. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, but I will say you're a professor at Pratt, you're an urban agriculture expert, advisor, and you're the president of the New York City Community Garden Coalition. Anything you want to add to that?
I think that's pretty, that covers a lot of bases.
Basically, you're very passionate about urban agriculture and community gardening.
Yeah,
right?
I'm based actually at a community farm in the South Bronx, and it's called Brook Park Youth Farm. It's really literally my foundation. It's where I do work with youth who have been incarcerated. They're formerly incarcerated or currently court adjudicated, running through the criminal justice system. We approach regeneration, restoration, and restitution from a urban agricultural vehicle. That is to say, we teach them how to farm. And it's really, really cool because you learn to appreciate yourself as a result of being productive, as a result of engaging in a process that you can see bearing fruit in, and no pun intended, but that is harvested, is recognized, you're being recognized for such. And in some cases, actually earning money. In the case of being part of joining the Pepper Growing Collective for Bronx Soil. So it's really cool. I love it. I talk about it. I teach about it up at Pratt. So.
And how long has that been going, that program specifically?
Well, the program in the South Bronx with the youth farm has been going on since 2011.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And describe the farm to us, the community garden. Describe it to us, what does it look like?
So close your eyes and imagine a green oasis in the heart of an urban jungle. We have cherry blossom trees. We have weeping willow trees. We have any number of fruit trees, pears, cherry, plums, peaches, figs. We have a chicken coop, and we just got so much stuff going on. A greenhouse. It's really quite active in terms of being a community farm site.
And so, for the community that you're influencing, it must be quite a shock for them sometimes to be in that kind of urban oasis. Mm-hmm. What's it like when they first arrive? When they first come in for the first time, what do they ask? What are they curious about? What are they surprised by?
Wow. I mean, some folks are just absolutely delighted, surprised to see corn growing in the South Bronx, growing in the city. It's over 6 feet tall and it's bearing fruit. To actually see tomatoes and beans, and those are the older folks. For the younger folks, You can't eat that right off like that. Try it. Try to take that bean. And so, just getting turned on to what it is, what it means to grow food, to harvest it locally, and to consume that food. It's nutrient dense. It's so fresh that it's super, super tasty. And that's always a real, something of a revelation for folks that are used to just going to a supermarket. And
so I'm really curious more about the programmatic elements around the formerly incarcerated youth and how they come. What is it about community gardening or agriculture that you see as a key influencer in transforming that population, helping them get to their next stage?
Well, one of the things that community gardening, community farming lends itself to is that it's very physical. The nature of the work is very physical. So one really is already being engaged and calling upon one's body to move, to build. There's light construction work in terms of preparing planting beds or building, other types of containers for seedlings. That all involves a process. That all involves learning that process, and that all involves proving yourself through that process, learning by doing, and seeing the results of your engagement. So it's very affirming. Why that's so important, Henry, is because we're talking about human beings who are still in their formative growth and development years, and who are living through a type of trauma, to be sure, to be arrested, to be adjudicated, to be incarcerated, on top of already being hungry at home, being food insecure, and living in a household that maybe is struggling in any and every sense of the word. Here is an opportunity for a young person to feel productive. So it affirms, it's very validating of a sense of personal agency, of personal efficacy. And that, again, during this very formative stage in their personal growth and development, they still need that. They still hunger for that.
Yeah, I think it makes me think about just the city as this kind of concrete, cold jungle. And if you come from a place of privilege, you may have stability, you may be able to order whatever you want off Seamless, you may be able to go to the places you want. But if you don't come from that place, or if you've lost something because you've lost your way and been incarcerated, I can see how connecting with nature, connecting with the community garden, and the slowness of that and the complexity of that can then open up what you said, which was agency. And so that's a beautiful thing. I just wanted to say that again.
Wow, thank you.
We talk a lot about at agritecture about a spectrum of different types of urban agriculture, right? So we've got high-tech farms, community gardens. Some of these differences are technological. Some of them are for-profit versus non-profit. And, we want to see a picture where there's a huge diversity in that. But community gardens are really interesting because they provide a unique benefit. Like you said, a lot of the food is free. A lot of the benefits from it are engaging with nature, but also they create safe spaces. And so could you talk about the challenges that community gardens are facing right now in New York City and even historically, and the threats of real estate towards that?
Wow. Well, community gardens, you're absolutely right. The way community gardens are discussed, the conventional wisdom in policy circles is they are occupying land that has real estate value. What we are engaged in within the movement of community farming, myself as an academic, as a professor at Pratt, what I do is we really go in and dig deeply into the assumptions around value. What is the basis of valuation of land? Land, depending on who you speak with, it can have it can be monetized and commodified and have that kind of exchange value from a real estate perspective. It can also have tremendous use value. That is to say, addressing practical needs, and I'll just allude to a couple of them. One very, very, very briefly is the co-benefits, the ecosystems, ecological co-benefits. really the presence of community gardens cools temperatures, so it addresses urban heat island effect. Whenever one is in a place that's amended with organic matter, the compost cools soils, the evapotranspiration that happens through the leaves of plants, through the leaves of trees, cools the environment. The canopy of trees cools the environment. Urban heat island mitigation, stormwater runoff mitigation, carbon sequestration, air filtration. There are folks that come into our community and say, oh man, when I'm here, I don't need my asthma pump. Where we're located, we're in Mott Haven, borders Port Morris. That's at the very southern tip of the South Bronx. Why that is significant from a built environment perspective is that we're surrounded by highways. In this case, when one is growing food out of raised beds, one is not only producing that food, but one is also helping to address the city's vulnerabilities around its aging sewer infrastructure. In other words, we have a CSO problem, combined sewer overflow problem in the city. We're in a CSO tributary area. There is a critical density of community gardens there, such that if really intentionally approached from a green infrastructure development perspective, could really enhance the stormwater runoff mitigation. As a matter of fact, those buildings that were adjacent to community garden sites actually realized less damage than those that weren't. That is to say, from flooding and that sort of thing, meaning that the community gardens already were having a beneficial effect in terms of mitigating the consequences of flooding and stormwater runoff. So
it's helping. I mean, that data is helping. Unfortunately, it took a superstorm to do that.
Right. Yeah, and it's that.
And so you're saying that there's also resilience, and I believe this too.
Yeah.
There's resiliency benefit to having farms in the city.
Well, this is the case that we're making as we speak with that project, as well as with other initiatives. It's certainly what I'm doing out of Pratt. Community gardeners, as a population, we're not against affordable housing. As a matter of fact, community gardeners themselves are in neighborhoods that are heavily rent burdened. It really speaks to it being a function of high unemployment and high poverty, and how that plays itself out into rent burden. How that continues to play itself out for households that are rent burdened is those same households are food insecure. Gardens we've had, I'm looking at the woman right now, a grandmother at our community garden said, I'm so grateful I have this plot, because at that time of the month when rent is due, I can still provide a meal for my family. In other words, that food insecurity issue is a reality.
Why can't we design buildings that have community gardens on the rooftop? Or why can't we design, and maybe you'll be opposed to this because of the soil piece, but I'm curious to hear your perspective, smart community gardens, ones that are indoor, right? Ones that use hydroponics. Is that the future of community gardening, where we push new architectural models to integrate them?
Well, thank you for that question, because that's actually the challenge for policymakers. I think, they get paid a pretty penny, and they need to work commensurately to earn not only that pay, but to earn the public trust. In other words, yes, there can be win-wins. Yours truly here, we're working on approaching zoning from very non-traditional approaches. That is to say, the city has employed the instruments that the zoning instruments and the planning instruments I'm about to mention, and that is to say, special purpose district zoning. And what that means, along with this instrument known as transferable development rights, one can preserve and one can develop at the same time. This is an approach to city plan
It's a model.
We've actually proposed this to city council. And then, yes, you're absolutely right that, vertical farming, rooftop farming, all kinds of growing. The unique nuanced beauty of outdoor community gardens is just the visual openness of it that's very welcoming. And
you don't get fruit trees in a vertical farm,
right? And it serves as a hub. It serves as a cultural hub. As you well know, folks come together, and it's a place where people can come and cultivate relationships. So this brings up other assumptions. when it comes to land, yes, ostensibly and de facto and by law, the city owns the land where community gardens are located. Who owns the work? Our communities to be recognized as entities with as much of stakeholdership, if you will, in terms of deciding what happens on the land. These are unresolved. These are the types of issues that I challenge my grad students with, that I have grad projects on, really looking at these assumptions. In other words, we have to evolve as a polity. We have to evolve in terms of our political economy. And we have to really look at what it means to be a coastal city dealing with the new normal of extreme weather in this climate of climate change. And so all of that really means that we really have to rethink how we're approaching development. And so it just cannot be a sole function of just one matrix of valuation, that being real estate. There's a lot going on.
So, I think one thing that's been really on my mind lately is hearing Karen Washington talk about food apartheid as a new term versus the kind of typical food desert. I've heard some people say food swamps because there's a swamp of bad food.
Right.
What does that mean to you?
Yes. Well, thank you. And I totally completely subscribe to the term food apartheid. What that does, to be sure, when one is examining, when one is taking what I would call a 10,000-foot view of what's going on in communities, yes, food desert. Yes, the issue of food access. Yes, that's what's going on. The term food apartheid speaks to the reasons why we have a food desert, the reasons why we have food access issues. And they have to do with the configuration of poverty, of high unemployment. And how did that come about? If you know the history of the Bronx, these were all decisions by Robert Moses. The idea was to build public housing, concentrate poverty, jobs left, and this was all...
People just drive through it.
Right. We have a collective, it's a pepper growing collective that's with other mission-driven, not necessarily mission-driven, but there's a refugee community farm, New Roots, New Roots, Cheryl Duran, right? There's La Finca del Sur, the farm of the South, which has a double meaning. Yes, it alludes to the South Bronx, but it also is alluding to the global South. And this is a community farm founded by women, run by women and their allies. So it's really alluding to who are the farmers in the world. So all of us have come together to grow peppers and thanks to Karen Washington for pulling us together.
And that's a branded product from the South Bronx that people can buy.
Right.
And that supports your work.
Exactly. Precisely.
And you're growing peppers at different sites.
At different sites. So it really is speaking to the validity, the agricultural validity of community farming.
I love the idea of added value products from community gardens that can create the revenue, that can connect residents with the farms themselves and create jobs. Because I think one of the downsides or one of the critiques of community gardens is, well, where's the economic development? Right? And I think that added value product now allows us to take that and say, hey, we're doing more than just creating a safe space about diversity and managing water. We're creating some jobs here. So if the goal is to get young men and women in the Bronx involved in agriculture, involved in jobs, what are some of the ways that you think you could also bring in this new technology? Right? Is that important to your mission?
So just to be very clear, soil-based, community farming, controlled environment, ag tech, they're not mutually exclusive. No. It's all part of the broader industry of urban agriculture.
We want to make sure young men from the Bronx that are involved in agriculture have the confidence and skills to apply for the job.
How do we, expose youth at an early, again, during those formative growth and development years, expose them to this area, and so that they can begin to think in the broader sense of resiliency. What does that mean on a local level? Because conventional, as you well know, Henry, the conventional model of monoculture agriculture is just devastating the environment. I mean, look what it's done out to the Mississippi Delta. It's a dead zone, as a result of nitrogen runoff and so forth and so on. So, to the extent that we can talk about, promoting resiliency from a socio-economic perspective as well as from a socio-ecological perspective, I think there's room for discussion here.
Ray, I have to thank you so much. You're inspiring, and it's really great to give this very important but different angle to the landscape of agriculture in New York City.
I'd love to move the conversation forward.
Amen to that. Thank you, Ray.
Yes. Thank you, Andy. A real pleasure.
So, in conclusion, I'm really inspired every single day by the entrepreneurship and the energy around urban agriculture in New York City. It's across the spectrum of technology in urban ag that we talk about. You've got community gardens, you've got soil-based, for-profit farms, you've got farms on rooftops, you've got greenhouses on rooftops, multiple ones. You've got farms in basements, containers, vertical farms in warehouses. You've got a lot of different ideas. You've even got floating farms like Swale. So there's really a huge variety in New York City that makes it super exciting. And as an entrepreneur, your job is to really look around and see gaps and see also evidence of what's worked before. So it's a great place to be an urban farmer and to develop your urban ag tech business. And again, we really want to see you at NYC Ag Tech Week, September 21st to 26th. And we'll be diving into the specific topics that are going to help you understand your place in the ag tech ecosystem. Maybe you're an investor, you're looking for a company to invest in. Maybe you're looking for a job in a company. Maybe you have a company, you're looking for customers. Or maybe you're a policymaker or somebody who sees that they can make an impact in this industry. Or maybe you're just curious about it. We want you at the event. You can learn more about it at nycagtechweek.com.
Thanks for listening today, this episode of Locally Grown in New York City. And if you want to learn more and follow along what agritecture is doing around the world, you can follow us at agritecture on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and check out our blog. We post new articles daily that hope to inspire you.
See you next time.